This is your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. With another episode of Breaking News. Today's the second day of the 8th month of 2017, however you like to say it. And here's the news, friends. The 20s are almost upon us. Are we going to relive history? Is swing music going to make a comeback? I think so. That's not really news. That's more just sort of a random opinion by this host. Here's the news. A sanctions bill against Russia was signed under awkwardly private settings. And with very little fanfare, none of the usual flapping the book around to show his crazy Sharpie pen signature. Closed doors, no media, no commentary, no tweets about it, no pen handing off to others moment. Now, why is this news? And what's all the speculation about? And what can we make of it ourselves, in truth? And how can you not be asking yourself, how shady is this administration willing to flaunt its shadiness? Like, to what level of crazy shade are they gonna, like, just sinister, suspicious? Curiously, in other news, the stock market reaches record highs. I wonder what that's all about. The rich people getting richer, everybody else getting more angry at themselves and each other. In awkward, should be in the blooper reel moments today, Lindsey Graham, I think, accidentally said President Putin when he meant President Trump while discussing the actions that the two are engaging in vis-a-vis this back and forth with sanctions. He said President Putin has done one thing, has achieved to unite the Congress. And I think he meant that as a critique of President Trump, that the Congress is united, is becoming increasingly united against President Trump, not against Putin. But then again, it's hard to tell. We're living in an era where the GOP, which was once the more rabidly and viciously anti-Russia, anti-Soviet Union party out of the two, interconnected, totally in on everything together, bipartisan political system that we live in, and suddenly they aren't. I wonder if that's indicative of something or just a really unfortunate flub. Maybe time will tell. In international news, though, China trumps Trump in its level of epic saber rattling. For those not familiar with the term, that is a call of invoking machismo threat of war vis-a-vis the act of literally rattling your sword in its holster or in its sheath, and that the more viciously you rattled your sword at the enemy was a taunt, daring them to grab their sword. It's kind of like saber rattling is essentially the pre-America, pre-militarization, pre-industrial, ancient equivalent to that time or that moment in a shootout in the old Wild Westy America mentality when two gunmen would square off and, I guess, somehow measure each other's speed worthiness in drawing, and prepare their hands for that hair trigger. Who's going to draw first? Once the other guy draws, then it's okay to draw. But then who's going to shoot each other and die, kill the other? You know what I'm saying? Like you're daring the other person to pull their gun and shoot you so that you have an excuse to shoot them faster. That's what saber rattling means. Except that it was coined in the time of swords before guns. But I think it's more understandable and relatable when it's equated to a gun. China just got the jump on Trump with rattling their own saber in reaction to, or maybe in solidarity with, kind of hard to tell, not really sure what's going on, but according to the reporting, now this may all be fake news, but according to the reporting I've been able to look into and see in my very limited time, China launched a fusillade of missiles at mock-ups of U.S. THAAD missile silo deploy stations and warships. In a sort of, we're just doing military exercises too. This is known as the ramping up period. This is when, in order to stoke public sentiment, the statist system invokes the defense of the public it overseas and in each state. You'll note that if we target North Korea, China will probably respond. If North Korea targets us, several of our nations will, our ally nations will respond. And it's a catch-22 of who's going to drop the bombs first. Well, in that atmosphere of fear, I don't mean to be the fearmonger. I'm here to explain to you the fearmonger's tactics so they no longer scare you. That worst case scenario, they don't actually really want that because it does not suit their long-term objectives. We've already poisonified the planet pretty hardcore, and those who run the organized murder for profit propaganda scheme that is inherent in all statist control systems, regardless of whether they're democratic or otherwise, they don't want to blow up the world. Not really. Although they might fool themselves into letting it happen. What they want is to send our brothers and sisters, our children, off to war to kill each other in order to prevent the end of the world. This is the ultimate setup in the fabrication of consent, the manufacturing of consent and support and tolerance for endless war. World War III has already been going on, folks. We might get around to having a world war called World War III, just for the shits and giggles of it, I suppose. Fun fact, if you don't believe me, and this is news, go dig it up, go verify it yourself. And here's the thing about the news media. Yeah, it's all kind of owned and operated by the same small collective of super rich people that must be in league with each other to be doing whatever it is they're trying to do. But they still sort of use the truth against us, because sometimes it's way easier to peddle brainwashing if it's littered with true things. And here's a fun fact that is true. Technically speaking, by all international law, the original Korean War that divided North and South Korea into the two very different countries that they are never really ended. Let that sink in. Let that break some news for you. They stopped reporting about it like an active war. We are all kind of in an endless tension ceasefire of saber rattling, but no peace treaty was ever signed, and no declaration of the end of such military engagement was ever come to consensus internationally and ratified in some international way. through international law. No declaration of peace was ever made there. We're at a never-ending edging towards new calamity, permanent war with one of the tiniest countries on the planet, who has some of the most dangerous allies that we haven't already gone in and bombed yet. Interesting the way some news agencies cover it, right? And how they kind of mix the truth and mangling bullshit. Fox News was really quite on top of the fear-mongering. And on the left is also fear-mongering like crazy in their much more PC, politically correct, let's not sound like we're fear-mongering. Let's sound like we're critiquing the fear-mongers. But they're still normalizing the status quo expectation of endless conflict. They had a really long segment about the unintended, which kind of summed up in unintended consequences of weapons testing, weapons manufacturing, I guess, by inference, but weapons testing specifically, and they were framing it in terms of the unintended consequences of North Korea's weapons testing, because it's nearly hit a boat or a plane on occasion. It lands in Japan's international or national waters of commerce, not international, because we have internet. We've divvied up the ocean, folks. We've driven imaginary boundaries through the boundless, unified sea and carved it up with our ideas that are more important than reality. And then we ignore really important things about reality. You want to talk about let's break some news about the way this reality works. Weapons manufacturing and testing and the operation of the industrialized military machine, this giant organized murder team that each of our countries has, which is really what it is. It's like our favorite sport, international organized murder sport. And we just are afraid to call it that, so because it'd be too weird if we could just buy tickets and go watch it in a stadium. Or would it? Oh shit, we've done it before. I like to bring that one up every once in a while. But I digress. That whole mechanism, that whole system of systems, is the biggest polluter on the planet. Doesn't matter which country you are. If you're running a military, and the military has boats and planes and factories that make bombs and trucks that travel around dropping, there's almost next to no enforcement of environmental protection policy, even if it's flaunted about as like the gold standard by whatever country that's pretending to observe them. The military generally don't. They are the single one biggest polluter. Is it then a curiosity why the military has no comment, or military individuals generally have no comment about global warming, and they keep saying, oh well, security is more important, better fuck global warming, that shit'll figure itself out? It's because if we understood that every general in every army knows that they're the ones dumping the most amount of toxic shit into our air and into our water and all over our once fertile soil through every moment of every day's activities that they conduct, even during peacetime, never mind during war, and that they're allowed to get away with it, they're too big to fail, not because our safety is literally in danger, but because they don't want anyone to realize that they're the ones who set up all the danger in the first place. Because they manufacture and sell all the same stuff to everybody on all sides of ideological division. You see the pattern yet? You notice that everybody who's anti climate change, that doubts climate change, is also generally kind of hawkish, pro-warish, and also quite astoundingly stupidly a self-identified religious person. the weird extreme to which Fox News went to normalize war in its coverage while seeming to, and I'm picking on Fox because it's the more egregious, and they'll all collapse if we really expose the most egregious, right? Instead of chopping off all of Hydra's heads, go for the biggest one at the center of the cluster and split the whole thing down the middle. But not with violence, with love. I'm not advocating for going and committing any acts of violence against any journalist, they are human beings too, yo. What we're trying to do is liberate their minds, heal their minds by recognizing that they are our brothers and sisters. But our brother Cavato, whatever his first name is, I can't remember now, Chris Cavato, was wrapping up a sort of mixed interview discussion about the saber rattling and about the threat and the security threat and about the markets. And this was his kicker, and I think it was wrapping up the show because he went to commercial, and then I got bored in commercial break and changed the channel. But it was close to the end of the hour. And he says, I quote, I have good news. Well, I paraphrase quote because I may have fucked it up even in writing it down. I had to rewind it twice, and I may have not gotten it exact, but it's really close. You can look it up. I'm sure it'll probably be findable on the internet. I have good news for you. Trading is still advancing. The market is still hitting new records. So even if the whole world is gone tomorrow, you will still be richer. Let's unpack that for just a brief moment and really break that news. It's news that this news guy said it. I propose to you because it's evidence for the meta theory, or one sub-layer of the meta theory that some of us are trying to advance, and that's that our own illness is what keeps us oppressed, and that even well-intentioned, supposedly religious, people will fall for the conditioning. Why? We've been conditioning ourselves for centuries. It isn't just a matter of since World War III or whatnot, but since the advent of the postmodern era, the systems of infusing us, bathing us, drowning us in the brainwashing have become hyper efficient. That even they don't even have to try anymore. The newscasters are already spewing out because they've grew up in the system, went to school in that brainwashing system, studied to be journalists with their predisposed biases already confirmed. As we were talking about in forgive me for using the royal we. I don't really like it when others do. As I was speaking about in a different segment of unauthorized and explicit readings, Karen Armstrong points out that we evolve slowly and gently, but most of our fundamental ideas about the world were formed when we were children, and that when it comes to things like religion, we don't advance much, and that even though we do advance throughout life, all of that is varied and highly influenced by our society and those norms. China is supposed to be our ally. It definitely is one of our strongest trading partners, and is supposed to be the friend that we're going to go to put the pressure on North Korea to chill out. And yet China was blowing up mock-ups of U.S. Thaad missile silos and U.S. warships in their military exercises. Or we're being told that. If it's a lie, fancy schmancy. But if it's the truth, woo! Double whammy fancy schmancy, in my opinion. Those that operate all the media, they want us to live either in fear or in enthusiasm, support for the war machine. That which we claim to believe in as God, which is bigger and more grand and more divine. Let me shed some breaking news to you. I don't think maybe I have already. Have I blurred the lines so much with all my podcasts? They're all the same thing, really, and I just have different title cards just to seduce different type of audience members into listening. Let me break some news to you. The thing you call God is bigger and grander and more mind-blowing than any image of God described by any one religion ever. And it has no need for war. And it especially does not give two fucks about profiteering on war. So any devout Christian, any Muslim, any Jew, anyone of any faith telling you that security is important, and we got to build more bombs, and we got to go kill the bad guy, and who pretends to understand God, is a liar. And especially anyone that says, go kill these people in the name of God, because God needs you to, is a liar. That's a liar. That is a lie. That is one of the original lies. One of the things we call our original sin as human beings, which is a term we abuse incorrectly, which I already rambled about in the previous episode. The only people that will be richer, or that are getting richer with this stock market, record-breaking records, are the ones that were already rich in the first place, that could afford to buy all the expensive stocks, and the few that luck out. Many others have lost their life savings to that monster. And I think it was it Marcus Aurelius or Mark Antony, some ancient Greek politician who was quite wise, said making money from money is the most unnatural way to use this unnatural system we call money. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing horribly. And why do you think the market is rages high and hits new records when the world is in chaos and on the brink of war? Gee, I wonder why. I wonder who's raking in the dough. The people who are setting up all the conditions that are leading up to us having to endure that war. If you're interested in finding out how we can put an end to it, but you haven't checked out any of my other podcast segments, I encourage you to. It's all interconnected. But I've got to run. I promised shorter episodes here with Season 2. Thank you for listening. Please submit your comments, questions, disagreements, agreements to the central email for all the podcast segments in this crazy, multifaceted podcast project, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo at gmail.com. Find me, like me, add me, share me on all your favorite social media platforms. And if you disagree, bring it. Just don't come in swinging with nothing but bullshit and hate. Bring your intellect and let's discuss. Anyone interested in becoming a co-host, a guest, have an article or a success story of your own you'd like to share that you identify, that you feel strongly would fit within this little project, hit me up. I'm looking for content contributors. And if you are one of those people that loves to support art and interesting projects like this one, please, I humbly invite you to visit and peruse my Patreon page. It is your generous support that is helping to make this possible, and will be making it possible for myself to transition from doing this as a hobby, which is why it's so rough and tumble and amateurish now, to doing this as a job creator and an entrepreneur. It's the wave of the future. It's part of the transition into new economies, which will, oh my God, frighteningly probably lead to the abdication of all money. But that's a long story for another episode. Thanks for listening, folks. May peace, love, and grooviness be with you. This show has been a production of C-Tech Studios, a wholly owned sole proprietorship of the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, an imaginary production company looking for people who are down to collaborate. song you're listening to is Burlesque by David Seltze. It was available on freemusicarchive.com. Shout out to them always for the awesome resource. May peace, love, and grooviness be with you. Until next time, this has been your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo.